When I left for a month-long business trip, I expected to return to my quiet, historic home just as I had left it. Instead, I found strangers walking in and out of my house, suitcases in hand, treating it like a luxury vacation rental. Before we dive into this intense story, we have a small favor to ask. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. It's always incredible to see how far our stories reach. Thank you so much. Now let's dive in. Some houses aren't just places to live. They have history. They have stories written into every creaking floorboard, every weathered brick, every towering window that's seen generations pass through its halls. And my house? It was one of those. A Victorian estate, old but imposing, with stone walls that had stood for over a century. A home built in an era when craftsmanship mattered, when houses weren't just made, they were designed to last lifetimes. Tall oak doors framed the grand entrance, their surface engraved with intricate carvings, each swirl and pattern whispering of the hands that had shaped them long before I was born. Inside, the foyer stretched wide and open, with a spiral staircase that coiled upward like something out of an old novel. Massive arched windows lined the halls, allowing light to pour in at just the right angles during sunset, setting the dark mahogany floors aglow with a golden hue. The house was a fortress of time, standing untouched even as the world around it changed. And I was its latest guardian, the inheritor of something far greater than just property. This house had been in my family for generations, and no matter where life took me, no matter how far I traveled for business, no matter how long I was gone, it was always home. But not everyone saw it that way. Some people looked at history and saw nothing but wasted space, and one of those people was Karen Whitmore. Karen arrived in the neighborhood 3 years ago, stepping out of her pristine white SUV like she had just been crowned ruler of a kingdom she hadn't built. Within months, she had elbowed her way into power, restructured the HOA, and turned it into her own personal empire of control and pettiness. At first, it was just annoyances, fines for grass being an inch too tall, demands that people repaint their shutters to approved colors, letters scolding homeowners for having unapproved decorations on their porches. But beneath the micromanaging, beneath the relentless fines and unsolicited rule changes, there was something more. Karen didn't just want order, she wanted ownership. And while she spent most of her time hounding neighbors about their flower beds and driveway materials, there was one property she had always been fixated on: mine. It started with comments, offhanded, seemingly innocent remarks whenever she passed by my house during HOA meetings or neighborhood gatherings, but there was always something about the way she said them, something calculated, something that felt like she was measuring my home, my land, my very presence here. One afternoon, she finally invited herself inside. I had been outside tending to some of the ivy-covered stone along the front entrance when I heard the sharp clack of heels approaching on the driveway. I turned. And there she was. Karen stood at the gate, dressed in one of her perfectly tailored beige suits, a clipboard in one hand, a faux-friendly smile stretched across her face. "Good afternoon," she greeted, her voice carrying that forced politeness that always made my skin crawl. "Karen," I acknowledged, standing up and wiping the dust from my hands. She tilted her head, her gaze sweeping over the grand facade of the estate, her eyes lingering on the tall iron gate, the massive oak doors, the sprawl of rooms beyond the arched windows. My, she said, sighing dramatically. "I forget just how big this place is." I didn't reply. She stepped forward, her manicured fingers grazing the gate as if she could feel the weight of history pressing against the metal. "How many rooms did you say this had again?" she asked, her smile widening. I folded my arms. "I didn't." Karen laughed lightly as if I had just told a charming joke. "I just find it so fascinating," she continued, undeterred. "All this space, all these empty rooms. I mean, it must be so difficult to maintain." I narrowed my eyes. "I managed just fine." She nodded, but there was a strange flicker in her expression, something between calculation and curiosity. "So, you're the only one living here?" she pressed. The question felt wrong, like there was a reason she was asking. I didn't like it. "That's none of your concern," I said evenly. Karen chuckled, raising her hands in mock surrender. "Oh, I didn't mean anything by it. It's just, I always thought a house like this should be more, I don't know, useful." That word stuck with me. Useful. Not preserved. Not respected. Useful. Like my home was nothing more than a resource waiting to be exploited. The conversation ended shortly after that, but I should have known. I should have paid more attention. Because while I was busy brushing off her strange fixation, while I was packing for my upcoming business trip, while I was trusting that my home would be waiting for me when I returned, Karen was already making other plans. I left for my business trip with no reason to worry. This wasn't the first time I had been gone for an extended period. My job often took me out of town for weeks, sometimes even months, handling corporate legal disputes, high-stakes negotiations, and courtroom battles that required my full attention. I had done everything right before leaving. The house was fully secured, the alarm system was active, my housekeeper was stopping by every few days, a trusted neighbor had a spare key just in case. Everything should have been exactly as I left it. But the moment I pulled up to my driveway 4 weeks later, I knew something was very, very wrong. The first thing I noticed? The people. Strangers. A group of young travelers standing on my front lawn, chatting, laughing, dragging suitcases across the cobblestone driveway like they belonged there. I gripped the steering wheel, my stomach twisting. I had never seen these people before in my life. What the hell was going on? I put the car in park, stepped out slowly, my eyes sweeping across the scene. There were folding chairs on my porch, a makeshift sign propped against the gate, and then I saw it. A large wooden board nailed onto my front fence with bold hand-painted letters, "Welcome to Whitmore Guesthouse, affordable rooms, luxury experience." My heart stopped. No, 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 this was a mistake, some kind of sick joke. I moved toward the sign, ripping it off the fence, my hands shaking as I stared at the words. Guest house? Before I could process it further, the front door swung open. And there she was, Karen, wearing a neatly pressed blouse and tailored slacks, a clipboard in one hand, a grinning couple following behind her as she led them out. She was smiling. She was smiling like she hadn't just stolen my home. She handed the couple a receipt, shaking their hands. "Thank you for staying with us," she chirped. "Remember to leave a 5-star review?" The couple smiled, waving as they headed toward their car. And then Karen saw me. She froze. Her smile wavered, her knuckles tightening around the clipboard. "Oh," she said after a pause, "you're back early." I stared at her. For a long, stretched-out moment, I said nothing. Then, finally, I spoke. "Karen," I said, my voice deadly calm, "what the hell is going on?" Karen recovered quickly because of course she did. She gave a bright, practiced smile, straightening her blazer as if this was just another day in her perfect little world. "Now, before you get upset," she began, raising a hand, "let me explain." I took a slow step forward. "Explain?" I echoed, my voice flat, unreadable. Karen let out a light laugh, shaking her head like this was no big deal. "It's really not a big deal," she insisted. "While you were gone, I realized this house was just sitting empty. And, well," she gestured toward the travelers milling around my lawn. "There's such a need for affordable lodging in this area, and it just seemed like such a waste for all these rooms to go unused." My jaw tightened. "So you turned my house into a hostel?" Karen beamed. "Exactly." I stared at her, my hands curled into fists. "You broke into my home." She waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, I wouldn't say broke in. You illegally rented out my property." Karen tilted her head, giving me that same sweet, condescending smile she always used when she thought she was winning. "I prefer to say I optimized community resources." I took a slow, controlled breath. She really didn't know who she was dealing with, but she was about to find out. Because this was war. I pushed past Karen, storming into my own house. The moment I stepped inside, I felt a sharp, nauseating wave of anger roll through me. The grand foyer violated. Suitcases stacked near the staircase. A cheap brochure stand advertising local attractions. And worst of all, a crowded dining hall filled with tourists eating breakfast at my antique mahogany table, like this was some damn bed and breakfast. The walls felt smaller, suffocated by unauthorized presence. This was my home, my family's history, and Karen had turned it into a business. I turned back to her, my voice low, shaking with barely contained rage. "How long?" She blinked innocently. "How long what? How long have you been renting out my house?" Karen pursed her lips, pretending to think. Oh, well, about 3 weeks now. 3 weeks. I felt my blood boil. And you thought I wouldn't notice? Karen sighed like I was being unreasonable. I figured you'd be gone for months, like last time, she said, crossing her arms. And honestly, I was doing you a favor. I let out a dark chuckle, shaking my head. A favor? She nodded enthusiastically. Yes, you have all these empty rooms, and the neighborhood is always talking about how wasteful it is for one person to have this much space. I simply repurposed it. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. You think you had the right to do this? Karen's smug smile widened. Well, she tilted her head. Technically, yes. The HOA has certain privileges when it comes to ensuring that properties are being used for the benefit of the community. I clenched my teeth. And who gave you that power? She grinned. The HOA board unanimously approved the decision. I let out a low, dangerous laugh. Karen had no idea what she had just done, but she was about to learn. Because if she thought the HOA had power, she had no idea what I could do. Karen was still smirking like she had everything under control. She still thought she could talk her way out of this. She had no idea what was about to happen. I turned away from her, stepping into the middle of the crowded dining hall where at least a dozen guests were sitting at my table, casually eating breakfast. Strangers, in my home, tourists, people who thought they had paid for a legitimate stay at a luxury guest house. I let my voice carry across the room loud and clear. Attention, everyone, I said, keeping my tone calm but firm. I need you all to stop what you're doing and listen carefully. Conversations halted. Forks clinked against plates as heads turned toward me. Karen's smirk wavered slightly. Ladies and gentlemen, I continued, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this is not a guest house. Confused murmurs rippled through the room. A man near the coffee station frowned. What do you mean? I mean, I said, scanning the room, this house was never a guest house. It was never for rent. You have all been scammed. A pause, then chaos. People started whispering, then shouting, looking around at one another, confusion turning into panic. What the hell do you mean scammed? One woman shouted, gripping her suitcase. We paid a deposit, someone else called out. I booked this place weeks ago. You're telling me this isn't legit? Karen laughed nervously, stepping forward, hands raised as if she could calm the crowd. Now, let's not be dramatic, she said, her voice strained with forced patience. There's no need for panic. A middle-aged man with a travel backpack cut her off. We paid over $2,000 to stay here for 2 weeks, he snapped. Are you saying that money's gone? Karen visibly paled. Well, I wouldn't say. You wouldn't say, he exploded. Where's our money, lady? The crowd grew louder, people pulling out phones, checking booking confirmations, some frantically calling their banks. The panic spread fast. A woman holding a toddler looked close to tears. I don't understand. We booked this through a travel site. We were told this was an exclusive luxury guest house. A younger couple near the window looked at each other, then back at me. Are you the owner? Yes, I said simply. And you're saying this isn't an actual guest house? I met their eyes. This is my private home. I was gone for a business trip, and while I was away, Karen illegally turned it into a rental. Their faces darkened with rage. One by one, the reality sank in for every person in the room. They had been lied to. They had been scammed. And now, they were furious. Karen tried to regain control. Okay, everyone just relax, she snapped, raising her hands like she could somehow command the situation back in her favor. Relax, a man scoffed. Are you out of your damn mind? You stole our money. Karen flushed, forcing a smile that was barely holding together. No, you don't understand, she said, voice frantic now. There's been a misunderstanding. I can refund you all. We just need to. That's not how this works, Karen. She turned sharply, eyes blazing. And there I was, standing calmly in front of her, arms crossed, watching as her entire scam unraveled in real time. You broke into my home, I said, my voice even but firm. She huffed. I didn't break in. You trespassed, I continued. You illegally rented out a home that was never yours to rent. Karen opened her mouth, but I cut her off. You charged people thousands of dollars, I went on, my voice growing sharper, and gave them fake receipts, fake contracts, and fake promises. She clenched her jaw, trying to hold on to the last shreds of her confidence. This was for the community, she spat. I let out a dark chuckle. Oh, so the community benefits from fraud and theft now? Karen's lips pursed into a thin, furious line. I pulled out my phone. And since you love the community so much, I said smoothly, I think it's only fair that they know what you've been up to. Her eyes widened. What are you doing? I smirked. Oh, just sending an email, to the entire HOA board explaining exactly what you did. Karen's face turned white. Walker, don't... And while I'm at it, I added, let's get law enforcement involved, shall we? Then, before she could stop me, I dialed the sheriff. Karen's breathing hitched as the phone rang. You don't have to do this, she stammered. We can talk about this. I locked eyes with her. There's nothing to talk about. The phone picked up. Yeah, Dawson, I said. I need you to come to my house, now. Karen's face twisted with desperation. Walker, please, she gasped. There's no need for the police. We can fix this. I tilted my head. How? She blinked rapidly, scrambling for anything. I'll shut it all down, right now. I'll refund everyone. I'll take down the listings. I let out a short laugh. You mean you'll undo the felonies you just committed? Karen flinched. I turned away from her, looking around at the furious guests still demanding answers. You all might want to stick around for a few more minutes, I announced to them. The sheriff will be here soon. I'm sure he'll have some questions for all of you. Karen spun toward the guests, her eyes darting in pure panic. Nobody needs to stay, she blurted out. You can all just, go on your way. No harm done. Nobody moved, because everyone wanted justice. And Karen? She was out of options. Karen stood frozen, eyes darting between me, the guests, and the driveway where the sheriff's car was about to pull in. Her confidence was gone. Her power was gone. All that was left was panic. The guests were still murmuring angrily, some filming with their phones, others pacing, demanding refunds. And just as Karen opened her mouth, maybe to try one last pathetic excuse, Sheriff Dawson pulled into the driveway. The second he stepped out of his cruiser, he took one long look around. His gaze swept over the confused and angry travelers, the fake guesthouse sign now lying discarded on the lawn, the tourists standing in my own damn foyer, still clutching suitcases. Then he locked eyes with me. Walker, he greeted, his voice calm, but I could tell he was already pissed. What the hell is going on here? I didn't even get the chance to answer before Karen jumped in. Officer, thank goodness you're here, she cried, rushing toward him like she was the victim. Dawson raised a single hand. Stop! Karen stumbled, blinking in confusion. Step back, he ordered, and I suggest you think very carefully about what comes out of your mouth next. Karen's jaw snapped shut. Dawson turned to me. Explain. I exhaled, keeping my voice steady and professional. While I was gone on a business trip, Karen here decided to break into my home and illegally rent it out as a so-called guest house. Dawson's face darkened immediately. I gestured toward the angry travelers. These people paid for a vacation rental that was never real. She pocketed their money and has been running this scam for weeks. Dawson let out a long, slow sigh. Then he turned to Karen. Tell me this is some kind of joke, he said. Karen shook her head violently. No. This is all a misunderstanding, she said quickly. Dawson tilted his head. A misunderstanding? Karen swallowed hard. I didn't mean any harm. I was just utilizing wasted space for the community. Dawson blinked at her. Then, with no hesitation, he reached for his handcuffs. Karen's eyes widened in horror as Dawson grabbed her wrist and cuffed her right there on my porch. No, wait! She screeched, thrashing as he locked the cuffs in place. Karen Whitmore, Dawson said, his voice tired. You are under arrest for breaking and entering, trespassing, fraud, illegal rental operations, and grand larceny. Karen let out a panicked sob. Wait, please, you don't understand, she shrieked. Dawson didn't even flinch. You have the right to remain silent. No! Bill, help me, she wailed, twisting around, searching the crowd. I frowned, and then a black SUV screeched into the driveway. The door flew open and out stormed Bill Whitmore, Karen's husband. Stocky, red-faced, furious, he charged toward us. What the hell do you think you're doing? He bellowed, pointing at Dawson. Dawson didn't even blink. Arresting your wife. Bill's face twisted with rage. You have no right, Dawson sighed. Bill, step back before you... Bill swung first. A wild, reckless punch aimed straight for Dawson's face. The sheriff dodged effortlessly, twisting Bill's arm behind his back in a single smooth motion. Bill let out a pained grunt as Dawson slammed him against the side of the cruiser. "You just made it worse, genius," Dawson muttered, snapping a second pair of cuffs around Bill's wrists. "Bill Whitmore," Dawson said flatly. "You're under arrest for obstruction of justice and assaulting an officer." Karen screamed, "No! No! You can't do this!" "You can fight it in court," Dawson muttered, shoving Bill into the back of the cruiser. Then, with satisfaction, he shoved Karen in right beside him. With both Karen and Bill arrested, the case unraveled fast. Turns out Karen had illegally made over $50,000 in fake rental income, forced the HOA board to approve her scam through intimidation, misused HOA funds to finance renovations to my home, faked rental agreements to keep the scam going. The case moved quickly through the courts. Karen was convicted on multiple charges, including fraud, grand larceny, breaking and entering illegal business operations. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Bill? He got 5 years for obstruction and assaulting a police officer. And the best part? The HOA was completely dissolved. Every corrupt rule, every shady deal, every ridiculous fine Karen had imposed over the years, gone. And Karen? She lost everything. Her home, seized. Her money, gone. Her power, destroyed. She had tried to erase me from my own home, but in the end, she was the one who ended up with nothing. With the HOA gone and Karen out of my life, my home was mine again. The damage she had done, repaired. The people she had scammed, refunded. And me? I stood on my newly restored porch watching the sun set over my land, my history, my home. Karen had tried to steal it from me. But now she was sitting in a prison cell, thinking about all the ways she had screwed up. And I was exactly where I was meant to be, home. Thanks for watching. Please share your thoughts on the video. Comment Karen if you think she got what she deserved. Like if you enjoyed watching her entire scam fall apart. Share this with someone who loves a satisfying HOA takedown.